Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. First meeting on our agenda this evening is a special council meeting. It's a public hearing under the Planning Act. This meeting will be conducted by Mr. Aquilina, so I will call this meeting to order, and I will do a roll call. Just please say yes when I call your name. Councillor Bagu.
Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Councillor Beauregard is away this evening. Councillor Bodner's here. Councillor Bruno.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Danch.
I'm waiting for you.
Councillor Desmarais is in the chambers. Councillor Clayliff's in the chambers, and Councillor Wells are in the chambers. And to confirm the agenda, I have Councillor Bagu, seconded by Councillor Clayliff. Any questions with regards to the agenda? Seeing none, please raise your hand. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Disclosures of interest. I have one disclosure of interest, Councillor Danch, on the public meeting. Correct, Councillor Danch? Okay. Now we have a public hearing under the Planning Act, Planning and Development Department, Planning Division Report number 2020-123. Subject public meeting report for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, mineral aggregate resources and mineral aggregate operation zone. Dan, take it away.
Good evening to you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and those out in the virtual world. The purpose of this meeting is being held pursuant to Section 22 and 34 of the Planning Act. Is a city-initiated proposed official plan, policy amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment that is being presented to council and the public. The method of the meeting tonight, Mr. Mayor, was given in accordance with Section 22 and 34 of the Planning Act and Section 3 of Ontario Regulation 543/06 and Section 5 of Ontario Regulation 545/06. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the Port Colborne Leader on September 4th, 2020, and notice was also placed on the city's social media. Mr. Mayor, I'll give an explanation as to what's going to be followed this evening with this public meeting presentation. There's really, it's four stages, and I'll just quickly go over those. The first thing is that I will present Planning and Development Report 2020-123. We'll then hear any questions or comments from council to myself. I will then announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. And then I'll give a brief explanation of future meetings regarding this application. One thing, Mr. Mayor, if I could, before I start on my presentation of the report, we have a lot of public comments this evening. So I would like to respectfully request that council withhold any questions from the public that may have been asked to myself to allow me an opportunity to review them and then provide them through the recommendation report. So, Mr. Mayor, how I'm going to present the public meeting report is I have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to quickly go through, and then Charlotte deputy clerk will then be my turner of the slides.
Okay,
So the first slide is what I mentioned earlier. This is a city-initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendment that deals with the aggregate policies under the mineral aggregate policies and petroleum resources, as well as the aggregate zone operation policies or provisions under the zoning bylaw. So the first slide you see before you this evening is the official plan policy that I would propose to add to our aggregate and petroleum resources section 10.11. And you will see there's a list of policies. The first one, D, it is to require site-specific zoning bylaw amendments to permit ancillary land uses such as asphalt plants, cement concrete plants, and aggregate depots that blend and stockpile aggregate materials with salt and aggregate transfer, except where otherwise prohibited by the policies of this plan, subject to I, the protection of adjoining lands from the negative effects of a reduced water supply, noise, dust, odor, lighting, and outdoor storage. 2, the protection of the environment from negative effects of dust, chemical spills, runoff, or contamination of surface or groundwater. And 3, that access being directly to a road capable of carrying the anticipated truck traffic. And 4, notwithstanding the above, ancillary land uses will not be permitted where they are identified and as a prohibited use in accordance with source water protection policies, being 8.3 of this plan. Next. And so what I propose under the zoning bylaw is to add the following to section 2.2, uses prohibited in all zones. B, asphalt and cement manufacturing without an amendment to this bylaw. What that means is that in order to have asphalt and cement manufacturing as a permitted use, council will have to entertain an application for that change of use. Next slide. So these right now are the policies under section 10, the mineral aggregate and petroleum resources policy. These are the areas identified on Schedule C as mineral aggregate resources, and those are specifically used for the pork quarries shown on Schedule A, which we will turn to soon. The predominant use of those lands is for the quarrying, processing, storing, and shipping of limestone rock and uses, including the quarrying operation. Non-residential agricultural uses are prohibited on lands being quarried. Next slide. So what you're looking right now is Schedule A of the official plan. And what I highlighted is the arrow that you will see identified with the light purple with the diagonal blue lines. Those are the lands that are identified as mineral aggregate and petroleum resources. Next slide. This again will show you the aggregate lands with the dark purple, but this will also show you the lands that are identified by the Onondaga Escarpment and Bob Cajun bedrock that are identified in the city of Port Colborne. Next slide. Under our zoning bylaw, section 28, this is what is currently permitted in the mineral aggregate operation zone. Mineral aggregate operations, making or establishing of pits and quarries for the purpose of extracting natural materials from the earth, including soil, clay, sand, gravel, rock, shale, and minerals. Processing of natural materials, including screening, sorting, washing, storing, and other similar operations used to an extractive industrial operation. agricultural uses and uses, structures, and buildings accessory thereto, except any building or structure used for human habitation. Next slide. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Mayor, there was a lot of public comments. All of the comments you will find in the recommendation report as Schedule A. What you will see in the public information report are those members of the public that provided me comments before Wednesday of last week. As I mentioned at the open house, in order for me to include the comments in the public meeting report, those were provided by Gary Gaverluck, Barbara and Larry Butters of 1152 Weaver Road, and Jack Halinga. So what I've done this evening is I've provided all of the comments that have been made. And if the people did identify a municipal address, I included those in the comments. What I've done with all those comments, which I believe all of council has received, is I have summarized those for the purposes of this meeting tonight. So if I could, Mr. Mayor, I'll start with Gary Gaverluck. He is not in favor of allowing asphalt or concrete manufacturing in wet pits, and storage must be 30 meters of a body of water or within 2 meters of a groundwater table. Barbara and Larry Butters are not in favor of any changes that allow activity below the water table or in wet pits. That allowing development must be located in the proper location that pose little or no risk to neighbors. Jack Halinga wants the official plan and zoning bylaw to be clear in the prohibited and permitted uses. That definitions be included for the aquifer, groundwater table, and the high vulnerable aquifer, and address uses within the groundwater table. Peter and Donna Bonato of 2559 Fire Lane 3, they want to protect the health and welfare of residents, the aquifer, and the environment. Next is Robert Henderson with the Niagara Water Alliance Group. They would like the bylaw to protect the quality of water by disallowing the importation of fill of any kind at any time for any purpose into a wet pit. Next. Next is from Emily Brands, wants pit 1 protected from materials being dumped on top of the water supply. Next is from Betty Conk, wants the amendment to be simple and not allow the importation of fill of any kind into a wet pit, include the definition of a wet pit and the protection of the aquifer. Next is Lori Tokola. She wants that the bylaw amendment not allow fill of any kind to be deposited in a wet pit. That asphalt or concrete manufacturing and storage should not be permitted in a wet pit, and would like to have simple wording and defined wording in the bylaw. Next is Susan Rawlings of 55 Michael Drive South. She wants to save our water supply, stop the pollution by quarries or anyone else. Next is Anne McLaughlin at Scorpio and Sika Groves. They actually had the same comments, so I kind of lumped them together. They would like the bylaw to protect the quality of water by disallowing the importation of fill of any kind, of any time, at any time, for any purpose into a wet pit. Natalie wants wording and definitions to be precise in the zoning bylaw and what is prohibited and permitted specific to dry and wet pits. Joseph Van Ruven at 787 Highway 3 states that the bylaw amendment not allow fill of any kind to be deposited into a wet pit, that asphalt or concrete manufacturing and storage should not be permitted in a wet pit, and wants to have simple and defined wording. Next. David Henderson has stated that the amendment needs to be simple and that it needs to say that the importation of fill of any kind at any time for any purpose into a wet pit be disallowed, and that a wet pit be defined and rehabilitated. Next is from Sandra Billow, that the bylaw amendment not allow fill of any kind to be deposited in a wet pit or wetlands. That asphalt, concrete, or toxic substances, whether manufacturing, recycling, or storage, should not be permitted in a wet pit or a wetland. That it contain plain language, and that any future applications to approve prohibited uses be denied. Next is from Cindy Mitchell, that the agri industry is a necessary industry, that the aquifer below should be protected, that there should be a definition of a wet and dry pit, that future use should not be any activities of dumping, storing, recycling, and manufacturing of any material should be done in a wet pit. Nope. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, members of council, my Zoom got kicked out, so I had to log back into it. Sorry, excuse me. So that any material should be done in a wet pit that exposes our groundwater to any risk of contamination not be allowed. Two more comments came in late this afternoon, Mr. Mayor, that I would like to bring forward for council's information and the public as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so Richard and Janet Phillips of 1413 Lorraine Road is not in favor of an asphalt or concrete plant. They had issues with the current quarry operations, and they have some concerns of their well water. Next one was from Odell Hare. He's asking to vote against any dumping of any material, no matter where it comes from, in our quarry. He wants that the quarry be filled with water only. So, Mr. Mayor, that does conclude the public meeting presentation. I would ask that if any council has any questions to myself, keeping in mind of what I said previously, that any questions specific to any of the public comments allow me some time to actually review and address council through the recommendation report. If any council has any questions related to the process that I like to take, I would also invite those questions or comments to myself.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Online, does any councillor have a question at this time? Okay, I'll go to chambers. I'll start on my left. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, I think you've seen in the responses that people sent to you that everybody's looking for clear and concise language that's easily understood. Is that, okay, I'm not picking on planners, but sometimes the wording that goes into planning documents are easily understood by you guys and less easily understood by sometimes members of council and the public that's hearing them. My question simply is, can we use simple language? And if you have to use words that aren't maybe understood by everybody, can we have a column on the side that says this means this? That's my question. Thank you.
Mr. Aquilina, that's a good question.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bonner, yes, absolutely. I would like to do that. We in the planning field are aware of the public's concerns that they have. It's not only council, but it's everyone across Ontario. So one of the things that we've always talked about was, I don't want to sound like I'm disrespectful, but plain English. So my goal is when I bring this forward to council again, any changes in the zoning bylaw or even the official plan to make it more simple. But I do like the fact, or do like the comment that you said about putting something onto the side to actually have an explanation of what it means.
Okay, Councillor?
Okay, for now, I might have something later on.
Councillor Clayliff, any questions?
Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Aquilina, not really a question, just an addition. Perhaps a definition list would be helpful as well. I know we've had a few of them lately and they do come in really handy as far as explanations, but just some of the terminology that, again, we talk about, that if you have a clear definition of what a term means, it makes it easier for people to understand as well. Sometimes it can be short and sweet and it makes it really easy. So anything that you can do would be helpful, Mr. Aquilina.
Good, thank you. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, considering how very important this is and how much information there is to go through, I would actually like to request that the recommendation report be released well in advance of the usual time that it would be. Normally we'd have 2 or 3 days to look at something before we had to decide it in council. So if we could possibly have this maybe an extra week would be nice. That way we have a chance to talk to the public, because it's to have that happen on the Monday of the council meeting is of no use to anyone. So I would appreciate if we could do that.
Dan?
Yep, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais. That certainly can be done. I will coordinate with Mr. Louis. He needs to sign off on the report. But I was thinking of, once I know that the report is drafted and forwarded to Mr. Louis, to actually have that 1 week before council normally releases its public agenda. So I will do that for you, no problem at all.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, this is in regards to your report. In specific, the amendment number 4, where it states, notwithstanding B above, ancillary land uses will not be permitted where they are identified as a prohibited use in accordance with source water protection policies in section 8.3 of this plan. Are you referring to the official plan in that statement?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, that right now presently is our only policies for the source water protection. They'll follow suit with what the Conservation Authority and the Niagara region have put in place for this groundwater protection. There are a few different intakes within the city of Port Colborne that we have identified, as well as what's identified in our official plan.
Well, my question in regards to that was, you referred to section 8.3 of this plan. If you're referring to the official plan, 8.3 is a wrong reference. 8.3 is the page of the section of that reference. That reference is actually 8.1.2 of the official plan. There is no section 8.3 in the official plan.
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, I appreciate that. That is one of the reasons why we have this public meeting presentation. It was not identified at the open house, but most definitely when the report comes back to council, I'll make sure that it's captured accurately. So I thank you very much for that comment.
And then I would like to add to that also, because it refers to the official plan and it refers to the source water protection policies. There are no source water protection policies in the official plan. Those are included, as you earlier referenced, into the Niagara Regional Official Plan and the Niagara Regional's source water protection. So in fact, our city official plan does not cover source water protection or associated prohibited uses. So by making those amendments to our official plan, there is no real protection for the source water or the aquifer that we're talking about here. In order for us to resolve that, the aquifer would have to be identified and acknowledged by the city as a source drinking water. So, and then that way there, it would be covered in the regional source protection plan, as well as we could adopt or put in place our own safe drinking water policies and protection of that source. But as it stands, the official plan for the city actually states, and I'll quote this in section 8.1.2, servicing within the rural area on page 8.2. Municipal infrastructure services shall not, and I emphasize that, shall not be provided in the rural area of the city. Individual on-site water services shall be provided by the developer of his own site. So that leaves the responsibility to each and every well owner within Ward 4 to ensure the quality of that aquifer, which is not reasonable. So from that, I would suggest that the official plan would need to be amended and identified the aquifer as an official drinking water source, to have the ROP policies apply, and the city's official policy will need to be amended to add such source water policies that would apply to the aquifer. So I'm a little concerned that by that amendment, it doesn't serve any purpose.
Dan?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Wells. Right now, presently, the region of Niagara, through their policy plan review, is going to be addressing that very matter, the actual groundwater, for the rural residents of all of Niagara region. I asked the planners at the region, have they actually developed policies yet? And they said that it's still under review. So that is a great comment that you made, and most certainly the official plan could be amended based on what I know is down the pipe, but we could put a policy that would address the groundwater that's out in the rural area and have that policy amendment brought forward as well to council.
Councillor?
Thank you, Dan. My conversation with the region stated that unless the aquifer is identified as a source drinking water, that it would not be considered. And in order for that to be done, it has to be requested by or acknowledged by the city as a potential source of drinking water.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Wells. I've had many conversations with planning staff. They are aware of the sensitivity of the groundwater out in Ward 4. So that is somewhat of a surprise, and it will be something that will be addressed one way or the other.
Councillor?
Thank you, Dan.
You're all set? Okay. Dan, if you can just confirm that with planning staff down the region. We had our agricultural meeting on Friday. It was touched on, not at great length. Basically, they stated the same thing as you, is that this isn't finished yet. They're in the process. So if you could confirm what Councillor Wells was bringing forward, I appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will.
If you can get back to all
many
just
conversations that we have at the jar, but I will bring that up again.
yeah, just get confirmation on it. If you can send that to all of council, thanks. Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Bodnar.
Dan, or Mr. Mayor, through you to Dan. Dan, you had read from a number of submissions that you got on this. And they probably came in late, but I think it's important to acknowledge that there was 3 other ones that didn't make your list that we have in front of us tonight. Now, maybe they were the ones that you lumped in together, but there was one from Wayne Huffman and Carol Huffman, Hayden Hallowell, and Heather McDougall and Ron Barta. So I'd just like to highlight those in case they feel they've been left out. Would that be correct statement, Dan?
Dan?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bonner, that is correct. My presentation were only those that sent something specifically to myself.
Okay.
Those comments that came in, I believe Amber had mentioned those comments to council, but those after the public meeting would be included in the recommendation report, as well as all of the comments would be in their current submission. Again, I took each submission and I refined it, shortened them up so I could present them to tonight's meeting instead of reading them verbatim. We'd be here all night.
Okay, Councillor, thank you. Okay, Dan, I think that's it from council. Next up,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This does conclude the public meeting presentation. One thing I will do is that I have all the email addresses from those individuals that provided me comment. I will actually email them when this report is forthcoming, and I will also email them whatever decision council has, in addition to advertising that in the local papers. That is my statement to council, and I will do that. So, Mr. Mayor, when I actually have all the comments addressed, and when I'm in a position to bring forward a recommendation report, as we talked about, I will add that to Mr. Louie. We will inform the public in advance when that is going to be forthcoming, a good solid week before the actual council meeting, when council will consider the recommendation report. So that is my promise to you, members of council, that I will do that. So, Mr. Mayor, this does conclude the public meeting under the Planning Act, and I thank you for your time.
thank you, Dan. So this time I'll have Councillor Wells move and Councillor Bruno second that we receive this report for information. Any further questions? Seeing none, please raise your hand, all in favor. That's carried unanimously. I now adjourn this meeting. I will now call the regular meeting of council 2620 for Monday, September 28th to order. And I'll go right into my mayor's report. This evening, Councillor Butters is away, so she will not be attending this meeting tonight. So again, good evening and welcome to our virtual council meeting. Tonight we're welcoming Councillors Bodner, Desmarais, Califf, and Wells into the council chambers. Also joining us are our CAO, Scott Louie, Clerk Amber Lapointe, Deputy Clerk Charlotte Madden, and a member of our WeeStream. Our other three city councillors this evening and various city directors are each attending on Zoom from their homes. At this time, we remain in stage 3 of the COVID-19 recovery process. However, in the past few days, positive cases across the province and in Niagara have started to rise. We emphasize the need for social distancing, hand washing, and face coverings where social distancing can't be maintained or where required by the region's face covering bylaw. We ask that you continue to support our local businesses, including restaurants, as patio season will be coming to an end soon, and all of our businesses still need our support. The YMCA in Port Colborne is working towards their reopening on September the 30th, and we have a presentation from them with all the details later this meeting. We will also be opening our walking track at the Valley Health and Wellness Center on October the 1st. The hours of operation will be Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Walkers will be asked to sign in, and the track will be monitored by staff for maximum allowed occupancy. Walkers will also be required to wear a mask at all times, and currently we will be allowing walking only on the track. As we enter into our fall weather, this will give residents another outlet for exercise in a safe and controlled environment. As things during COVID do change from time to time, some of these things may get delayed based on what the province may come down with, as we've seen over the last week. But we are prepared with our plan, and then we'll follow what the province has with what moves forward. October 4th to 10th is Fire Prevention Week, and while we aren't able to hold our traditional open house this year, We want to remind you that fire prevention is everyone's responsibility. Fire Chief Tom Cartwright has provided us with the history of Fire Prevention Week. National Fire Prevention Week was established in 1922 in memory of the Great Chicago Fire. The Great Chicago Fire was a conflagration that burned in the city of Chicago during October 8th to 10th of 1871. The fire killed approximately 300 people, destroyed roughly 3.3 square miles, 9 kilometers, of the city, and left more than 100,000 residents homeless. Let that sink in. It is such devastation. Every day is Fire Prevention Day within our city. Your fire department strives to ensure the safety of our citizens at all times. The theme of this year's Fire Prevention Week is Serve Up Fire Safety in the Kitchen. Cooking is the leading cause of home fires and injuries in Canada. Use Fire Prevention Week to educate yourself on cooking hazards, the dangers of unintended cooking, and precautions you can take to prevent cooking-related fires. We thank our Fire Chief, Tom Cartwright, and later in our meeting we will be passing a proclamation to declare the week of October the 4th to 10th, 2020 as Fire Prevention Week in the city of Port Colborne. Also, remember to please check your smoke and carbon monoxide alarms to ensure they are working in order. They are in working order. On Friday, this past Friday, the City of Port Colborne entered into a memorandum of understanding with the City of Welland, the City of Thorold, and the Hamilton-Oshawa Port Authority. Each partner acknowledged the need for a collaborative and inclusive approach to building economic sustainability in Niagara. By signing the memorandum of understanding, we're solidifying our partnership with these communities in order to achieve our goal of increasing marine infrastructure. No longer are we working in silos, but joining forces to strategically create innovative approaches to moving goods to and from Niagara by means of the Welland Canal. I have no doubt this will have a positive impact on the Port Colborne community and surrounding area. And one of my favorite Christmas traditions at the City of Port Colborne is our annual Christmas card contest. I've always enjoyed seeing the creative and colorful submissions we receive from our local students. Although holiday activities may look a bit different this year, I hope this is just one of the many ways we can still engage the Port Colborne community and celebrate this festive season. Submissions may be painted with fingers or brushes or drawn with pencils, crayons, pastels, or markers on a standard white sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, in vertical or horizontal format. Remember that deep, dark colors produce a better illustration. The contest is open to all children who live or go to school in Port Colborne, up to and including those in grade 8. Time is of the essence. To be chosen and reproduced for printing in time for the holiday season, all submissions must be received at the Mayor's office in City Hall by Thursday, October the 22nd by 4 p.m. Please include your child's name, address, and telephone number on the back of the artwork. Also this past week we saw the repaving of Main Street from Ramey to Highway 140, and I have to thank, unfortunately Barb's not here, but both Barb and I have worked on this since we were both first sworn into office. Barb has been down at the region, and in the first month, CAO Louis and I sat down with Ron Tripp, who was the former head of Public Works, who is now our acting CAO, and that was top of our list here in Port Colborne. So it's good to see that. Barb and I think both believe that this was going to be 2021, and they've pushed it to this fall. So that's a road that's had in need of resurfacing for a lot of years. So again, thanks Barb for all the work that you've done on this. In closing, we ask for your patience while we all work together for a safe and gradual return to services. We must remain vigilant in fighting the virus. Our number one priority is the health and safety of our staff and our citizens as we continue the safe and gradual reopening of services and business activities. Please stay safe. Any questions with regards to the Mayor's report, or I'll take any regional questions? Are there any this evening on the Mayor's report? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. This is more what would have been on the regional councilor's report. I had an inquiry about some of the pumping stations in Port Colborne. Many of them are now fitted with propane generation. So in the event of a storm, they will kick in if the power goes out. The gentleman asked me if he could have a list of those all stations, and if they are all outfitted with auxiliary power. So I was just going to ask, forgot that Barb wasn't going to be here tonight. I don't know if that list could be obtained.
Just writing this down. I'll find that out, Councillor, and get back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Great, thank you. Madam Clerk, introduction of addendum items.
There are none this evening.
Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. Mover is Councillor Bagu. Seconder is Councillor Clayliff. Any questions on this? On this one? Yeah, Councillor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Last council meeting, I thought, as Councillor Bruno suggested, we put councillor concerns near the beginning of the agenda. And this agenda, I don't even see it on the agenda whatsoever. So could you get some clarification, please?
Here, it's actually item 12, Councillor. I know it doesn't show on your page, but it is. Item 12 is staff items and councillor items. Item 13 is bylaws, and item 14 is the adjournment. So you are there.
Oh, sorry, my number 12 says consideration of bylaws.
Yeah, just move that to 13. Adjournment is 14, and slip in number 12, which is staff items, councillors items. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions? All those in favor, please raise their hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. I have none for this meeting. I'm not seeing anybody have their hand up. Perfect. Adoption of the minutes. I have 3 sets of minutes, councillors. The regular meeting of Council 23-20 held on September the 24th, 2020. Special meeting of Council 24-20 held on September 24th, 2020. And special committee of the whole 06-20 held on September 17th, 2020. Our mover is Councillor Desmarais. Our seconder is Councillor Bruno. Any question to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. I have items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 11. Anything further? Thank you, Council. For the approval of the items not requiring separate discussion, Councillors Bruno and Danch will move that. All those in favor, please raise their hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We have no delegations this evening. We have one presentation. We have Sharon Shills, Center Manager for Port Colborne YMCA, regarding the Port Colborne YMCA reopening plan, Phase 1, which is found on page 25 of your agenda this evening. Staff. And Sharon, welcome. As soon as Sharon's ready, she can start.
Good evening, Mayor Steele, council members, City of Port Colborne staff, and members of the public. I am the Center Manager of the Port Colborne YMCA. I am pleased to be here tonight to share with you our reactivation plan. With me is Kathy Ann White, our Vice President of Health, Fitness, and Aquatics. Next slide, please. We are super excited to announce our opening. We're ready to open on September the 30th. Next slide, please. In this presentation, we are going to review Phase 1 reactivation schedule, our outdoor fitness class success, highlights of safety measures and protocols, and then review any questions and comments. Our YMCA has worked on the standards and procedures with YMCAs across Canada. Therefore, these are all national standards for all of our YMCAs. Next slide, please. During phase 1 of our opening, we will be open 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8 to 8, Saturdays, 8 to 4, and Sundays closed. We will have a special seniors hour daily from 1 to 2 p.m. We will be offering fitness classes, pickleball, basketball, and the fitness center and the lane pool. In this first phase, we are open to members. We'll be watching our numbers very carefully. We know the average rate of members returning across Canada and specifically across Ontario. We're noticing not everyone is quite ready to return yet. This is why we extended our hold policy. On average, YMCAs are seeing about 15 to 30% of adults return. It seems there's a difference between larger and smaller communities. Numbers are larger in the smaller areas. In Port Colborne, we are working on an assumption of 30% of our members returning during our first stage. Our program schedule has been modified to serve a smaller membership base at first, with our expectation that we will layer in more hours of operation and programs as more members return. This is a way to maximize the health and safety, member experience, and fiscal responsibility. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the fitness classes we are going to be offering throughout the week. Next slide, please. This is some additional information for aquatics specifically and our lane swims. Spots are booked in by using our easy facility in 60-minute block increments. Lane swim times are not just about lane swims, they can also be used for swimming lengths, water walking, or therapeutic exercise. Next slide, please. Here is our phase 1 schedule for aquatics. Next slide, please. Some general information. So masks must be worn upon entry to the facility and worn while moving about, but may be removed only when using equipment or engaged in exercise. We will be closed every day between 12 and 1 and 4 and 5 for deep cleaning and disinfection of our facility to keep everyone safe. Phase 1, as we stated, we are open to members only. Given that the population here in Port Colborne will be ready for day pass usage in our next phase. We will be paying close attention to the numbers of returning members to get an idea of how many want to return in order to handle our maximum capacities. We have started with 13 years old and up. We want to see volumes and people's return and how they'll adapt to these changes in the first phase. We will look to open up programs in attendance to children under the age of 13 years of age safely. Of course, we will also adapt our plans according to the direction from the province and the local public health. Next slide, please. The health check process, easy facility sign up, and fitness center info can be found on this slide. All of this info has been posted on the Reactivation page on our website. We have also sent this to our members through email, using a weekly member newsletter with any changes, and have promoted this on our social media channels. Next slide, please. Outdoor fitness classes, what a great success. While we prepared our indoor facilities, members and past members could participate in our outdoor fitness classes. Classes included cardio mix, yoga, gentle fit, stretch, and Ariba, and strength. We had over 35 participants with well over 200 visits. And this picture shows a great view of what took place outside of our valet center. Next slide, please. Highlights of our safety measures and protocols have been captured in the What to Expect video. Our team has been busy getting ready and doing everything possible to ensure facilities meet the highest standards of health and safety, and modifying our policies and programs to ensure program physical distancing practices can be maintained. Each of our health and fitness centers has undergone thorough deep cleaning during our closure. We have modified spaces, access points, floor plans, and traffic flow throughout the facilities and more. We have defined procedures. Should we see positive symptoms, a case, or if we are notified of an outbreak, in all those scenarios, we will work closely with our public health and their contact tracing teams. On our end, we are ensuring everyone has passed a health check prior to entry, and through our card swipe, we have individual personal information, including time attended and contact information, so we can work with public health. We also have a designated isolation room if someone should present symptoms. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I would like to thank the city staff for their support and their collaboration. The care and the kindness that has been shown have been absolutely incredible. Thank you everyone for your time and attention, and we welcome any comments and questions you may have.
Great, Sharon, thank you very much. Councillors, any questions? I have Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the great presentation, Sharon. I'm pleased you're back. I'm pleased, but not surprised with the first-class rollout of what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm very concerned for this why and all whys, given that it's very tough to operate on a 30% capacity membership with fixed costs that you do have. And so I'm just wondering if you've received any assistance from other orders of government, and how, I guess, why Niagara is coping with this rollout while being physically responsible and wanting to fulfill your mandate. That's a fairly broad question, and it's not the sole reason you're here tonight, but I think it shores up when you start talking about 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon?
Kathy Ann, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Kathy Ann, I'd like to refer the question to you, please.
We're working with a much smaller staff team and a more modest program delivery in order to maintain an appropriate cost base relative to the attendance we expect.
Oh, Kathy Ann, can you turn your volume up? We missed most of that.
Again, is that better?
Well, that's better,
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. As Sharon pointed out, this is a staged reactivation approach, and the first stage is very deliberately scaled to adapt to a smaller membership base. So you'll notice that there's a much smaller team of staff, limited operating hours, and limited programs, and that's meant to be added on to as people return. So we've lowered our cost base quite intentionally in order to be responsible. Definitely the YMCA has availed themselves of the SUS, the 75% for those staff that we have employed, and will continue to do so until that program ends. However, we are optimistic that we'll be able to layer in a few other programs, such as personal training and some other fee-for-service things that are best suited to physically distanced delivery or one-on-one delivery. And we'll scale as we go. We'll have to scale very cautiously, knowing that we are working with 30%. We've scaled the operation to about 30%. And that's our cautious approach this time.
Thank you. Councillor?
That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Any further questions? None from here. Oh, Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Sharon. Actually, the mayor answered most of my questions about the walking track, but I did look it up online and on the website, and there's nothing about the walking track on the website. So could you sort of tell me when there will be information to the public regarding how to reserve or not reserve for the walking track and the hours, etc.?
Yeah, we'll make sure staff has that. That is not run by the YMCA. That's operated by the city. So.
Okay, that's why
yeah.
I wasn't in there.
That's, yeah, it wouldn't be under the YMCA's. It'll be on the city's website.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bagu. Okay, seeing no further questions, Sharon and Kathy Ann, we really appreciate this, and we look forward to our residents getting back to using our Y. We know it's been a very successful operation here in the city of Port Colborne, and the number of programs that you've been able to offer our citizens has been fantastic. So we know it's going to be a slow rollout, but let's hope we get back to some normality sooner rather than later. Ladies, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Moving on to consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Item 1 is the Chief Administrative Officer Department Report 2020-134, subject COVID-19 update. Number 6. Our mover is Councillor Wells, seconder is Councillor Desmarais. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the 6th COVID update. As mentioned in the title of the report, I think in update number 5, I said it would be the last one, but I thought it would be a good opportunity, especially with the YMCA presenting today, to talk about where we are exactly with our city facilities. The mayor in his remarks used the term that I've used in the council chambers in the past, safe and gradual. And we did talk many times over the last 6 months about a safe and gradual reopening. Perhaps that was not the best choice of words, because city facilities, many city facilities have been open throughout the pandemic, just open in a different way. So I've taken this opportunity to go down the sort of list of the city's indoor facilities and talk about exactly what staff are working there, exactly what services are available at each facility, and what our alternate plans or precautions are that are in place. One of the most important things that I want to point out is that the city's priority throughout the pandemic has been the safety and health of residents, visitors, businesses, and of course our council and staff. It's important that the city is a location and it is the home for all of our residents, but it's also an employer, and we employ our staff. So those facilities are open, but they're open with precautions. And of course we have had announcements, including a fairly grim announcement from the province today about a second wave and about the numbers that are continuing to climb in Ontario and in Niagara. And as the mayor said in his remarks, we can't say for sure that we won't see some reduction in or disruption in the services that are available to people. So we will be meeting as an EOC, an emergency control group that is, in the Emergency Operations Center a little bit more frequently moving forward. We are going to meet one day this week where it previously wasn't scheduled, and we're going to have a discussion about if some restrictions might have to come back on some city facilities, whether that's mandated by the province or whether a decision is made locally to go beyond the province's recommendations and sort of peel back some of the services that have been made available. It's hard. It seems like every time we decide something, whether it's the farmer's market or the beach, 80% of the people like our idea and 80% of the people don't like our idea, and I'm not sure why there's 160% commenting on this stuff. I think some of those people might be voting twice or from out of town. But we are trying to find our way. We're trying to make the best decisions in a safe and gradual, to use those terms again, manner. And I will answer any questions if they are coming forward from council. I'll continue to update council by email. I know some of the email updates that go to council at the end of the week haven't been going lately because really we've been in a status quo sort of holding pattern. But perhaps as we see these numbers change, those emails to council and those reports at council meetings will continue to come forward. And that's everything I have for today.
Thank you, Mr. Louie. Questions from councillors? No. Councillor Bodner.
I think just a statement. I think members of that committee have been doing a very good job. There's no rule book to go to and say, if this happens, here's what we do. I think you've been very responsible, and anything you do in this environment is gonna create some controversy, but if you're doing it for the, protection of staff and the public, you certainly got my blessing, and I haven't heard any bad words from council on anything that's been done, so carry on. I think you're doing a great job. Thanks.
Mr. Louis?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Bodder and the rest of council. I appreciate that, and if it's okay with you, I'll take those kind words back to the Emergency Operations Center. There has been a lot of leadership, and I can't take credit for other people's work and other people's decisions, but sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle among the essential workers and the sometimes political things that are happening federally and provincially and locally. The amount of leadership that's been shown by our city's management team and by council ourselves. Decisions were made, sometimes hard decisions, sometimes financial decisions, and we found our way moving through the pandemic. So I appreciate that, and I'll pass it on to staff on the EOC and frankly to all of our staff at the city.
Thank you, Mr. Louis. And just to remind council, the CAOs continue to meet on a weekly basis. That might jump up now that we're seeing some inflated numbers across the province. But also our other staff, and Market Square is a perfect example, continues to meet with public health with regards to the numbers we're allowed in there and the number of vendors and things like that. So our staff, although it's not out front and center every day, they are working behind the scenes with our upper levels of government and our partners in the municipalities across Niagara with regards to this. So keep that up. And just one thing I'll bring up that we talked about last week at the signing of the inclusive communities. I polled the mayors there, the 12 of us were there, with regards to hockey rinks, or rinks in general, because they're more than just hockey, is the fact that almost every municipality has different rules. So I've asked our mayors that, can we come up with one set of rules that we can all agree on? Because it's so confusing. It may be easy for some adults, some will find it hard, believe me. I know some people out there that just can't get the idea of a rule to rule between arenas, but it's the kids. So when the children show up and they're allowed to do something at one arena, but then they go to another arena in a neighboring community, the rules are totally different. So I know Scott brought that up at his meeting with the CAO. So we are moving forward. The mayors were all on top of that. They were fine because it's just, and the issue is that our staff is inundated with, well, they can do this in Pelham or they can do this in Lincoln, and it's just that, if we can get together on this stuff and have one set of rules that we can work with public health, work with our hockey associations, our figure skating associations, and all our other users out there that have organizations that are working diligently as units to come up with these rules to enhance their rules for their leagues, specifically in this case mostly hockey, then I think it's going to be a lot easier on our users that's one set of rules and it's the same everywhere. So I can't wait to hear that, because the sooner the better. So no further questions. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Item 2 is Planning and Development Department, Planning Division Report 2020-63, Subject Meadow Heights Subdivision Agreement Amendment Phase 2. That is moved by Councillor Bagu, seconded by Councillor Bruno. Questions? I'll go to Councillor Bagu first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment, and on page 66, item 20.7A2, it's about the tree plantings in the subdivision.
Yep, go ahead.
And I'm reading it, and the types of trees to be planted, a lot of them are not native species to Ontario. And what I'm just suggesting is that maybe we could just get rid of a lot of those trees. The size is fine, but the species leave as approved by the city. And in the meantime, ask the Environmental Advisory Committee, along with the city gardener, to make a recommendation for native trees, native species be planted in new subdivisions in Port Colborne. I think it's important for the environmental protection, because example, one of them is a Norway maple tree, which is most municipalities are not allowing that to be planted in the municipalities because it's not a native species. So I'm just making that suggestion. You know, I don't know if you need an amendment or what the other councilors feel. I'll leave it up to the other councilors, but if it's okay, could we just have the committee look at it and make a recommendation to council?
Okay, maybe I'll just put this through staff because there's probably a reason why it reads like that. Mr. Aquilina, would that be you, or is this through Public Works?
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that question, and if Operations and Engineering wants to chime in, they can. This draft agreement was simply that. It was a draft that was reviewed by Mr. Khanna's consultants, and it's typically something that our engineering staff have a look at and agree to what trees could be planted in consultation with the city gardener. But if it's something that council would like to take a closer look at with those trees, I'm sure that it's not going to slow down the agreement itself.
Okay. Steve, you want to jump in here?
Through you, your worship, to Councilor Bagu, we can definitely look at revising the tree planting list. We actually have one in the works right now that accommodates all of the new trees that we actually want to have in there. Our initial thoughts were to hold back until we have the urban forest management plan in place, but this would be a good opportunity for us to put that list into play at this time, so we can do that.
Councilor Bagu?
Thank you, Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Steve, thank you very much. You're way ahead of me. One comment I'd like to make is the example, we need a variety of trees in a subdivision, not all the same kind. I looked down Renfield Drive and there's only 2 species of trees in that whole subdivision. So like a variety would be nice, like a tulip here, a maple here, whatever. So if we could make an agreement with the developer because the foreign species are getting in there and something gets in there, wipes out the whole species of trees, a whole subdivision can be wiped out of their trees, like the mountain ash more. So just a comment to Mr. Sipkowski. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, so we know that report will be coming forward through staff, so we can, if Councilor wants to amend this, we can wait or leave this list as it is, and then as they bring theirs forward. How do you guys want to move on that? Do you want to bring an amendment forward, Councilor, or do you want to keep with this for now and then have Mr. Shapowski and his staff bring forward their new report with regards to trees?
It's probably going to be we're talking years before this development trees get planted, I imagine, in this subdivision, Mr. Mayor, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true, or?
Mr. Kernahan is here on behalf of the proponent, if he wants to chime in here. Mr. Kernahan, as far as timelines when tree planting would start, can you give council an idea of that?
Through your worship, our plan is to undertake the works associated with this agreement this fall, and I would anticipate that tree planting would probably occur next year.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shapowski, when does your report come forward?
Through your worship to council, we can actually do this pretty quick. We can just change the actual trees that we're proposing right now, and we can have that for the next meeting.
Is that fine, Councilor Bagu?
That's terrific, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, just make sure you consult the proponent on this, Mr. Shapowski, just so they know as we move forward how these trees may or may not change. Okay, Mr. Kernahan, you're fine with that?
Through you, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kernahan. Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to thank both Mr. Aquilina and Mr. Shapowski for their hard work on this. There has been a probably inordinate amount of hours put into this small phase addition to this development, and that is unfortunate that our staff had to spend that many hours both correcting the start, doing some interim work while it was in abeyance, and now finally coming forward. I'm wondering if in this 84 pages, given the history of this development, the neighbors there have expressed to me in no uncertain terms that they want to ensure that there are securities in place and monitoring, inspections, and enforcement in terms of the ongoing development. So I'd like to start with, and Mr. Aquilino, I don't know if you have this ready. I know a resident had sent in a series of questions with respect to financial securities in place to ensure the development moves forward in case it does not, or is in midstream and the city has to step in. I don't know, Dan, if you have that email. I thought it was very good that the questions were very focused and highlighted in on 3 or 4 areas, and your answers were quite succinct. And I think for those watching and all those residents, both new in phase 1 and surrounding areas, I'm wondering if you could reiterate those points as far as financial security on the next step, being the next, this phase 2, if you have that at the ready.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, and I thank you for the comments. Yes, the city has in their hands the securities that amount to, don't quote me, about $496,000 that would complete the works. They were all costed out. They were reviewed. That is the cost to complete this phase of the subdivision. And if the work does not take place within a prescribed time, the city then has the funds to do the work themselves.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Through you to Steve, on the engineering side, and if you have to go in and do any works, are you satisfied with that agreement? Are there any issues you have, time frames? I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it that detailed. I understand it's mostly a planning document, but I'm just wondering if you have any concerns, or perhaps you could give a little bit of background on the work that's involved to get things rolling there again by your staff.
Mr.
Sure,
Szapalski?
through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bruno. So we'll still be reviewing the final drawing set for conformance, and we'll also be reviewing the contract itself. Any services that will be installed will be fully inspected by the city staff. We'll also, before we end up assuming all of the servicing, we'll ensure that all the services have been in compliance with the appropriate standards.
Thank you. I'm just wondering too, if you could speak to, because it falls heavily on your side, the levels of inspection and the frequency of that. How is that decided upon?
Steve?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bruno. So we do have a construction inspector out there. They're not full-time out there, but they do regular inspections, and especially when services are put in place and there's connections, it will be a requirement of the proponent to have a full-time construction inspector out on site. Typically, this is an inspector from the consultant that they've retained, and then they'll be ensuring that all the work is progressing in compliance with the contract as well.
Councillor?
Thank you. And should that be lacking, what's the process on enforcement?
Steve?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bruno. So essentially, we would discuss it. I mean, there could be stop work orders that are placed. If work does not happen and the work is abandoned, we would draw from those securities at the same time to correct any issues. So we do have those backup mechanisms in place.
Great, thank you very much. through you to Mr. Kernahan, the consultant.
Yes.
Sir, thank you for coming this evening, and I appreciate the work that you've done, and I've seen you appear before us before, and I'm pleased that you and your firm are associated with this development in this next phase. I know that the residents had asked for some closed board fencing along the side bordering Hawthorne Heights and Runnymede Avenue. I'm also led to understand that that's not a requirement with two single-family developments bordering on each other, notwithstanding one is a newer development and one is an established neighborhood. But I'm wondering if you could take back to the developer the great concern that whilst that fence would have been a sizable expense for the developer, sort of clear cutting all that land back up to Hawthorne has left all those potential lots, and I'm hopeful that it won't take as long to sell out as phase one. But those residents are very concerned about all the weeds and scrub that is up there and the seeds. I have a statement that I could paraphrase, but there's a lot of symbols and exclamation marks in it that expresses the frustration that, just 10 feet being cut behind homes on Apollo is not sufficient. So, I understand that, in all developments, one wants to be responsible financially, but I'm wondering if you could take back that, the residents there are a bit exasperated on having to call bylaw to cut those subdivided lots that won't be developed for some time. I'm just wondering if publicly you can at least state that your best efforts will be made to tell the developer if he's not going to build a fence, which would have been a big step in that solution, if he could stay on top of that interim work until the subdivision fills.
Mr. Kernahan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruno, absolutely. We're doing our best here to be a good neighbor. As you've heard, we've been working for over a year now to try and resolve the issues that we've had with the residents along Apollo Drive. So certainly, I can commit to you that I will take back to my client that those concerns related to the vegetation behind those houses, and I'll advise him it's in his best interest to keep his property clean.
Thank you, and there's been some good work done there on that lowering of the wall, and I know some of those residents along Apollo appreciate that. I wish your development nothing but good luck. The quicker it fills, the better it is for all of us, including the neighbors. There'll be a lot of people keeping a close eye on hoping that we can work in a spirit of cooperation, and the neighbors don't need to have to call in the levels of complaints they do. And I will be speaking to bylaw tomorrow to ensure that what's there, if can get cut down before any more seedlings drop or carry on if it's not too late. But I trust that you'll take that forward, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Bowles. I just wanted to confirm that all of the financial mechanisms are in place and prior to the execution of this agreement. Could you confirm that you've received or have in place all the certificates, securities, deposits, and fees so that we can move forward with signing this agreement?
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, I can identify that I myself have not read them, but I can ensure that they are in place before the document is signed.
Thank you.
Council.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, to Acting Director of Engineering Operations, Steve, there was a number of reports and documents that were supposed to be received and approved by our engineering group prior to the execution of the agreement. Do you know if there's anything outstanding?
Steve?
Through your worship to Councillor Wells, we still need to get a full set of drawings that will be fully reviewed by engineering before the document is recommended to be fully signed.
Councillor?
Thank you. And one last thing is, I noticed in my review of the agreement that there were a number of references that were in error, again, and also some formatting issues. I will send them over through to you, Dan, so that you can make sure that they're included in the agreement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Wells. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Item number 3 is planning and development. Oh, thank you, Mr. Carnahan. Item number 3 is Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report 2020-118, Subject Joint Agency Review Team Public Liaison Committee. The acronym is JART PLC or JART PLC. Our mover is Councillor Bagu. Our seconder is Councillor Bodner. I'll start with Councillor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just one question in the terms of reference. It doesn't actually state who will appoint the 5 members. I'm taking it for granted its council is going to do it, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Mayor. Could you...
Madam Clerk?
Yes, through the chair. This will come to council for approval.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the clerk, I guess, it does say that we'll be advertising for people interested in this committee. Can you give us an idea how soon that will happen?
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, I'll have to defer to the Director of Planning and Development. We are currently have our recruitment on hold for committees. That being said, if this is timely, we will make sure that we recruit for this committee as needed.
Thank you. Mr. Aquilina, how soon would the clerk be going out for applications on the JART PLC?
Mr. Mayor, I plan to do that. To get it into our local newspaper, we need to actually have that prior to the actual publication date on Thursday. So it won't be something that will be this week, but hopefully it will be in next week's paper and on our social media as well.
Okay. And how soon do you see that this committee would start to meet? What kind of, are you looking at next year or later this year?
Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned in the report, I would like to actually have the committee meet at least 3 weeks after the JART committee meets.
Okay.
So that way there's stuff to talk about. So the next JART meeting isn't planned anytime soon. So I imagine a first meeting with the committee would be taking place, I'm going to say within the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, the terms of reference are fairly simple, and I think they should be, because this is just an oversight committee that will make sure that information gets out to the public. But is there an opportunity to slightly tweak that terms of reference once things get rolling, and there may be, some need to give it some adjustment?
Mr. Aquilina?
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner, absolutely. If there's any change that's necessary, it's just a matter of bringing that back to council for their consideration, and that can be done subject to council's meeting requirements and timelines.
Councillor? All set? Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Item number 4, Engineering and Operations Department Engineering Division Report 2020-128, subject bylaw revision, parking restrictions on Bell Street. That's moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Clayliff. Councillor Wells.
Through you, Mayor, to Steve. Again, I just picked up on a reference to the church being on the southwest corner, and it's actually on the southeast corner. So if I could just, you might want to just correct that in your report.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Councillor? Questions?
No question.
Councillor? Okay, any questions online? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Item number 5, Engineering and Operations Department Engineering Division Report 2020-130, subject traffic safety review, intersection of Stanley Street and Wood Lane. Movers are Councillor Bagu, seconder is Councillor Wells. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm not in agreement with the recommendation. I know staff has to actually make the recommendation according to what government standards are, but I think it's important to have the stops sign there. And I'm just getting my notes here. I know the Ontario Traffic Manual guideline, they don't recommend, it's not warranted, and one of the reasons is the city can become liable if there's an accident, which doesn't make sense whatsoever. How you'd be liable if we put an extra safety precaution in there. I know the city has done this many, many times. I can give you examples. The stop sign on Chippewa Road, the stop sign Clarence Street near Rosemount, the stop sign Clarence Street near Hampton. Those stop signs were put in there to deter traffic speeding. And I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, your experience, and Councillor Bruno and Councillor Desmarais and Councillor Dench, there's a lot of other stop signs that were put in within the city limits to deter traffic. I know our police can't be everywhere, but it seems like the Stanley Street, as Clarence, is becoming a very big outlet for people to get onto the number 3 highway. When the pandemic lessens up, a lot more traffic is going to go through. I know we have the sidewalk on Stanley Street. We appreciate that, Councillor. If I appreciate it, but part of the problem was also that people wanted a stop sign, and that was the initial one, and then council just voted against it and wanted a traffic study. But like I say, I think this traffic study, the government parameters, is way out of line. And we can put a stop sign up wherever we want. And I don't think any judge in his right mind is going to find us liable for putting an extra safety precaution in the city, Mr. Mayor. So that's all I got to say about it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayliff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess, to Mr. Shapowski, I understand and thank you for all the work that you did to do this study. I'm in agreement with Councillor Bagu. I know that this was something that we originally asked for and it was refused at the sidewalks there. It's being used wonderfully. The cars continue to speed. I continue to get reports from people very concerned about the cars and the speed that they're going down there. I've experienced it myself. I think many of the other councillors have seen the cars traveling through there. We're also getting complaints about Clarence Street. I've met with the staff sergeant. He's been very good about all of it. And I know, like Councillor Bagu said, they're doing everything possible. We have areas of the city where we have traffic issues going on, and the police can't be everywhere. And I again agree that I don't think that one stop sign, I can't imagine that we would be held liable. And I think that some of these policies haven't been updated and things that need to happen. And if in the future we can ever remove it, you can always remove it. I think that this is a much better option than perhaps even speed bumps. I know people ask for those as well. But at this point, I think with all the kids on the street and new people moving to town, young people, I think that it's something that we should be offering them as an added safety feature. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions from those in the room? Any further questions from those online? Seeing none. Steve, a question for me. With the new sidewalk in, we have the entrance to Sunset Park where the new pathway comes out, which will be paved hopefully next year. Where it meets on Stanley, at Lakeview Park, we have an area where after you come across the bridge, the roadway goes up. It's not a speed bump. It's an actual lift that keeps the pedestrians a little higher than normal, where they're not at a height, then they go down lower, then back up, where it's level. So as a vehicle moves over, it's more flat than just a regular speed bump where cars bang and ground out at times and things like that. Is that something we can look at putting in at that subdivision, at that crosswalk on Stanley, once the park area is going to be paved? Can we continue that paving across the street to meet the sidewalk on the other side? Because it does act as traffic calming, but again, it's not a speed bump.
Yeah, through you, or to yourself, Your Worship. That's exactly what the plan is right now. Essentially, we ended up putting the concrete sidewalk in and butting it up against the curb so that there is a spot to transition over that will become a pedestrian crossing there and will be assigned accordingly. That will act as somewhat of a traffic calming measure and will allow safe travel of pedestrians across the street in that area. So it could help the situation as well.
Okay, thank you. I know there are stop signs in this city. I think my 17 years here, I don't think too many got in. I'm not a fan of stop signs. We've had police chiefs, we've had staff sergeants over those years. I know Councillors Bodner, Councillors Bruno, myself, maybe even Councillor Danch at one time, and Councillor Demery. I don't know if we had them when you guys first were elected, but they'll tell you stop signs aren't the answer. It creates a false sense of security. People stop and go quickly, or they just travel through it, or they jam their brakes on and they jam their gas pedal. And if you ask some of the people in the area of Chippewa Road that asked for the stop sign, they're all asking for it to be removed now because of those. So that's another area that we are looking at as a city. But I'll put this out there. I am not in favor of just placing stop signs willy-nilly around a community. And I think those warrants are there for a reason. And don't ever say that a judge would never find us liable. We could be found liable, believe me. In the business that I'm in, it's sometimes you scratch your head, but you know things happen, and that's something I don't want to put us in that liability position as a city goes. I don't think we should be putting our residents in there. I think we should be listening to the experts on this. But there are ways, and that's why I brought up that question to Mr. Schapowski about traffic calming. Some of those are good ideas. So I think that way it will slow the traffic down in that area. I mean, if you look at the number of people using the sidewalk today, the students or kids coming home from school now, the seniors that are using it, young mothers with their strollers taking the kids down. I mean, it is a younger neighborhood. We all want to keep things as safe as possible, but I think we have to do it in the right way. So that's my comment here. I have Councillor Bodner, then Councillor Clayliff.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything you said. I just want to confirm through you to Steve. Everything I've always heard is that stop signs are not to be used and are not effective at speed control. Can you confirm that?
Steve?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Bodner, that's absolutely correct. They're not to be used for speed control.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Clayliff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Steve. My question, do you have an idea when that cement crosswalk may go in there? How long are we looking at for completion of that?
Steve?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Clayliff, more than likely it's going to happen in 2021 with our asphalt contract. We don't really have the means of doing it right now. We're trying to expedite some other road crossings, so those are kind of where we're focusing our priorities right now. So 2021 it will go in.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bruno?
Actually, Councillor Califf asked the question I was going to ask, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bruno. Wow, that was short. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the report, please raise your hand. And that is carried. Thank you, council. Item number 7, Corporate Services Department Financial Services Division Report number 2020-132, subject Tangible Capital Asset Policy. I have mover as Councillor Wells, seconder as Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question to Director Bowles. I noticed in the budget that there's a disposition of some of tangible assets, and that they were not to, if they weren't redeployed, they were approved for disposal. My concern there is that some of these assets, if they're disposed of or sold or used other than being redeployed by the city, that they are not approved by council. So I would recommend that any disposition of a tangible asset should come back to council for approval.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council, I think, and maybe just to draw council's attention to the policy, we've suggested that land and significant assets would actually come back to council for approval. Other assets would include buildings and or significant infrastructure, whereas items such as computers, items such as smaller equipment necessarily wouldn't. And that's why I guess we specifically outlined land, building, and infrastructure.
Councillor?
In your policy, you stipulate what is a tangible asset as being something in excess of $4,000. And I think that at the end of life use, if something is worth more than $4,000 and is, under your definition, a tangible item, I think there could be a number of assets, tangible assets of $4,000. Let's just say, for example, a fleet of cars or trucks, each truck being in excess of $5,000. If that fleet or each individual piece is sold off through one director individually without approval from the board, that could amount to a significant tangible amount. So again, that's where I'm using that term that you used as tangible.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council and the councillor, just to point out, I appreciate the notification of 4,000. I do think we defined it as 5,000, but there's a lot in the policy. From a staff perspective, I'd be happy to suggest that we amend the policy to identify capital assets greater than $5,000, if that's the threshold to which council would like to see. I will point out in the purchasing policy, a director can make purchases and do transactions up to 20. But I would put it back to council that if you prefer 5,000 for this, that is fine.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Councillor Bodner, then Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. Just to Councillor Wells' point, and through you to Mr. Bowles, there must be a policy laid out of how we get rid of those. It's just not at the whim of somebody. Or is there not, whether it's a trade-in or if something is deemed surplus, it's just not somebody sells it out of the back of their car or something, right? Is there a policy in place that staff have to follow?
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, the policy outlines that first, and I can read from the policy, those assigned with carriage of a tangible capital asset are responsible for communicating a request for disposition with the department responsible for recording it. There's no, and then they have to go on to ascertain that there's no other potential users within the department. They have to consult with other departments to ensure no other department wants to utilize the assets. Then in the event that they can't redeploy it, then they can move forward to consider donating, sale, or other form of disposition, such as a trade-in, public auction, or negotiation. And then we go on further in the policy to outline that larger assets such as land, building, and infrastructure would require council approval before disposing of them. I think to the Councillor Wells' comment, he's looking for just some further definition to the size of that asset.
Okay, all right, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I mean, my concern is, directors, managers, $4,000 today is not much. I mean, if you can authorize somebody to buy something at $20,000, but we have to, I guess I want to understand the position of listing the capital asset above 4,000 coming back to council, if that's the direction. Is that just not going to add another level of work? But more importantly, could it not tend to delay the disposition? Through you to Mr. Bowles.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor, certainly it adds another layer of reporting. The reality is there are few assets within the city that don't go to their full useful life before they are sold or disposed of. I think what was pointed out in one of the questions was transportation and fleet vehicles is a good example where it is possible that some of those vehicles would be above a certain dollar figure and maybe of interest to council to know how those dollars are, or the dollars that we may get for that. An example might be a fire truck that would have a potential dollar figure above $5,000, potentially above $20,000.
Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. I guess my concern is, and maybe I could envision, 9 council members debating over, and how would we know the difference whether $9,000 for a used fire truck was good value or if it should have been 11. I mean, at some point, the people that are managing fleet, trading things in and out, buying, attending purchasing meetings, joint purchasing, having purchased all this stuff, I have to say, I trust them on the disposition. I'm concerned about the buying of the $400,000 truck, not the end of life, whether it's 11,000 or 9. So from my point of view, I just can't see coming back, or the usefulness of coming back potentially to debate something we don't know anything about. And so at the end of the day, I haven't heard of any dissatisfaction in the disposal of assets. And I think if they would have left at, you don't know what you don't know, but I think there's enough people around that if something was sold at a fire sale price or indiscriminately sold or sold without a policy, we'd have heard about it one way or another. So I'm not wanting to add a level of approval or slowing down the process when I think we've developing a team here now, led by yourself, Mr. Bowles, that I'm happy to trust with the policies being enforced and responsible and reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Louis.
Sure, through your worship to council, I appreciate the chance to comment on this issue. I want to highlight one part of the policy that the director didn't go on to state, and that is that the staff member, when making negotiating the disposal of the asset, must maximize the benefit to the city. So that means there's a requirement on the city staff person to get the best value for the asset. We have sold things in the past. Now, keep in mind, most of our rolling stock, it is fully depleted. Like we use our trucks up all the way. If anything, we have, we're buying a backhoe, $85,000, $100,000, and we're trading it into the dealer, the previous one. Bobcats, small equipment, and so on. I can't think of a single asset that we sell in a non-arm's length transaction. So these are sold to outside agencies. It's not that we're, selling a pickup truck at a sweetheart deal to a staff person by any means. Sometimes we'll let a council member who's no longer on council buy their old computer, but we go through a process where we make sure that we're testing the market value to make sure that they're not getting a sweetheart deal just because they were on council for 4 years. The amount isn't particularly material. I mean, $4,000 on a multi-million-dollar budget isn't a substantial, percentage. It's not a material amount. That's not to say that everything would be for the minimum. We could have purchases that are of a higher value. I think they'll also be reflected in the budget. So, for example, when a department is budgeting to acquire an asset, they'll also have a corresponding line as a revenue account called disposition of capital assets that will reflect the amount that the city expects to get. So, and the last thing, I would never be one to clip council's wings. That's certainly not my job. The Municipal Act tells us that council is responsible to exercise general financial control over the municipality. I would suggest that this might be specific financial control. This might be at a level of operations that council doesn't want to open up, because once we get that, we're getting into a very operational realm and not a policy realm. So I think the reason the director has written the policy in such a way that it's before council today is to make sure that we don't sort of open that box of micromanaging staff activities.
Yeah, and also, Mr. Louis, in the last few years, there's been a new governmental website that a lot of assets go to. So can you describe that? Because I think that's pretty open and transparent. I think you do get your best bang for your buck.
Through your worship to council, that's great to point, and I did mean to say that, and I forgot. Actually, recently got an email from the manager of that website after seeing him at a conference pre-COVID, where he was handing out his business card. So we have a website in the business, in the trade, called GovDeals, GovDeals. And if you have a chance to go on that website, you'll see everything from city trucks, provincial trucks, RCMP trucks, to desks and filing cabinets and cases that are in the front of an arena, say in the pro shop or so on. And that's a way of making sure you get the best deal, because it's an eBay type auction where one bidder outbids the last bidder, and you'll get something rather than setting a price and finding out after the fact that you've set the price too low, it actually allows the price to be bid up to what the bidders have deemed the market value to be. And that website is very well populated. It actually started in Niagara and expanded out from there. It's across the country now and into the States. And they do everything from, like I said, rolling stock to office equipment and so on. And there is a sister site that also does land transactions. We've never taken advantage of that yet, but maybe in the future that would be a way that the city could dispose of land if a piece of land was ever declared surplus, and it allows the entire community and beyond to make an offer on a piece of property.
I've seen helicopters, airplanes, large ships on that, and they're all government-owned assets. So, yeah, it is. Councillor Claylick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Boyle, I'd like to thank you for writing this policy. I spent a lot of time this weekend reading through everything, and I really was smiling, thinking to myself, this reminds me very much of both my regional and provincial experience with policies regarding asset management. I think that you've written in a lot of oversight and accountability for everyone, right from staff persons up to directors. And I realize at the end of the day, a lot of the responsibility does come down to you. And I think it's a well-written document, and I wanted to thank you for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Off to item 11, Corporate Services Department Financial Services Division Report number 2020-125, subject 2021 capital and related projects budget. That's moved by Councillor Bagu and seconded by Councillor Wells. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't think I was going to go first here.
I can always come back.
First, I have a question for Director Bowles. Self-sustaining entities. Can you give an example of what a self-sustaining entity is?
Mr. Bowles?
Yes, so we identified in one of our earlier reports, talking about the budget timetable, the introduction of self-sustaining entities. And the goal here is really to identify certain entities within the city, such as the marina, such as the cemetery, in fact, even the building department, because of legislation that exists around surplus and deficits, would be considered a self-sustaining entity. And we'd look for them to be able to cover their costs in years, so they don't have to rely on the levy or the taxpayer.
Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Director Bowles. My next question is saying to Director Bowles is, can you give us an example of pay-as-you-go funding?
Yeah, so pay-as-you-go funding is really the levy funding we have in the budget that we buy capital assets during the course of the year with cash or a check without having to go out and borrow money to buy the capital assets. So it's when we pay up front for an asset.
Mr. Bagu?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking for my big one here. The one I got here is the number 30 on the Tennessee. I guess $30,000 for the hire consultant to do an inspection and make recommendations. I'm just wondering, I find $30,000 quite a bit of money just for somebody to tell us we have to put a new base on it and new rocks in that, and maybe because of Councillor Danch's earlier email as a floating around that is just a number for an estimate, but I see on the west side of the gates how the new foundation has been put on there, and basically what I'm saying is the $30,000 will go a long ways to the actual repair work rather than somebody to tell us, yeah, you have to get it fixed. So you get some comment, maybe Mr. Sipakowski.
Steve?
Yeah, through you, your worship, to Councillor Bagu. Approval of this item will allow staff to complete a proper assessment of the wall and outline all the deficiencies. From there, a work list will be created, and depending on the scope and expertise required, we'll retain a contractor to complete the work with those monies as well. If the wall requires a full rebuild or very, very significant work, staff will report back to council with a revised plan at that time and potential funding sources.
Okay, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll come back to the last one. I can't find it on my papers here. So, can we come back to me?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment. I'd like to thank Director Bowles. He's given me some very personal attention in regards to questions I had in regards to the budget, and he's opened my eyes to the continuous improvement efforts that he's trying to put in place with the budget. So I would just like to commend him on his efforts stepping into the driver's seat on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Wells, for taking your time to sit down with staff. It is eye-opening at times when you can sit down and ask those questions one-on-one, so perfect. Councillors, any further questions? How about, I've got Councillor Kalaleff. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the council for question for Mr. Shapowski. I just noticed one item and I just wanted clarification on it, and it was regarding some infrastructure for lighting on West Street. I just wondered if that's going to be tied in. I think it had something to do with Canal Day's infrastructure. Will that all be tied in with when all of the pieces are done there that have to be done as far as the lighting. Like, I can't imagine that we're going to go ahead and do some more electrical when we've got all our difficulties that we've been having with the lights. Could you update us on that?
Steve?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Clayliff. I believe there is an item. It's for West Street electrical infrastructure for the canal. That aspect is a community services request, so I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Craig?
Good evening, members of council, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. Through you to Councillor Clayliff. Yes, this project has been identified. It was actually identified in 2019, put forward as a project for capital improvement. It is directly related to the Canal Thieves Marine Heritage Festival. In fact, we have for a couple of years now been steadily improving the electrical infrastructure along West Street in order to better accommodate our vendors and other festival partners. At this point in time, it is a project that is identified to proceed separately from any other infrastructure work that would be taking place along West Street. But if there's an opportunity to integrate with any other projects that may be happening in that area, it is certainly something that staff will do.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you again, once again, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the big one I got here is item number 29. The site remediation as identified confidential council report 2020-14. If I remember correctly, in the in-camera meeting, council made a decision not to go forward with the monies, instead apply for a grant. And I haven't heard anything about the status of the grant.
Councillor, that is an in-camera item. I asked you not to bring it up here. That actually hasn't been decided, so if you could wait for that, please.
Well,
Councillor, it's an in-camera item.
but you're asking for it at open
Councillor, I'll put this through to staff. Just okay, we're going to give you an answer here, Councillor, that we're allowed to give, but I do warn Council, be careful when you're bringing up in-camera items, please. Mr. Louis.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Bagu, there was a closed session that was discussed in this term of council. There was staff direction to apply for a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to undertake a project. That project will not be undertaken unless council approves it in the future, and it would only be proposed to council if that grant is successful. There is a component, so there are, I guess I can say publicly, without saying too much more than this, that there is a chance for no success on the application, and then there are two levels of success. One is a partial funding and one is 100% funding. If the 100% funding is received, there would be no city budget impact. If the city was successful in the partial funding, we would have to contribute, the city would have to contribute a share of the project, and that money would not be dispersed unless council approved it first. But we have to earmark that money, and we have to sort of, rather than come to council later and say the city's on the hook for X% and we don't have it, we're going to earmark the money and set it aside. And if that project is not undertaken, that money will not be dispersed, and it will come back into city operations to be approved by council for some other project.
Okay, Councillor?
I appreciate the answer. Maybe should have given us an answer in the last in-camera meeting instead of waiting for coming up in open council. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. That's the end of the items. Okay. Tickety moving along, please. Okay, item number 10, proclamations. I have a mover, Councillor Bodner, seconder, Councillor Wells, Fire Prevention Week, that we proclaim Fire Prevention Week, October 4th to the 10th, 2020. Any questions? Chief, any comments?
No, Your Worship, I think you covered it pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. Okay, well, it is carried. We'll go on to the videos. We can do the videos. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, we're having technical. I apologize. We're continuously learning with this Zoom technology. We're having technical difficulties tonight with the sound, but we'll get them on social media so everyone can look for them on Facebook. These will play them with no sound. Just one moment, we're going to be able to get it on audio. Thank you for bearing with us.
Hi, I'm Scott with Port Fire. Just want to talk a little bit about kitchen safety. Number one rule is we want to keep our combustibles away from our heating elements. And the second thing we often see is the distractions. We have to bring them to us when we're cooking. If the door rings, turn off the heat, answer the door, and then once you're done, come back and start doing your work. If by chance you take all the precautions in the world, I want to show you what you can do to eliminate a kitchen fire. So when we are cooking, we want to make sure we have an oven mitt and a tight fitting pot lid, and from there we can take care of any fire. We have an accidental fire, we pretend that this is our shield. We're going to keep this between us and the flame. We're going to bring it up, slide it on over the pot, which gets rid of the oxygen, turn off the heat source, fire's gone. But we still have had a fire, so we want you to call 911 and have our crews come out and make sure that your home is safe from there. If you have any other questions, safety concerns, please call us at 905-834-4512 and we'll send out a crew to check your house and make sure it's protected for your family.
Great. Thanks to the chief and the deputy chief, Scott. Great presentation there. And we will have those available on our social media, guys? Okay, so for those watching at home, look for that on our social media. Okay, on to the minutes, boards, commissions, and committees. We have the minutes of the Port Colborne Historical Marine Museum Board of Management dated February the 18th, 2020. I have Councillor Bagu moving that, Councillor Clayliff seconding it. Any question to those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise their hand. That's carried. Item 12, staff items up first. Staff, any replies to any councillors' inquiries? Just let me know. I don't see anybody online. Anybody here? You guys don't have anything? No? Okay. Perfect. Councillors' items. I'm going to start backwards tonight. I'm going to start with Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor. I only have one question, and this is directed through you to Sherry, if she's online.
Mr. Aquilino will take that.
Very good. This regarding a question that was posed to me by some visitors from out of town regarding the parking signs at the end of Pleasant Beach Road that stipulate for Rutter's customers only. The question was, if Rutter's is closed, can they park there?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, yes, if the restaurant is closed, the 1 hour parking still applies. The other thing I inquired about whether or not there's been any complaints regarding the Rutter's parking 1 hour, and there has not been.
Should we somehow not make that the public aware of that by a sign there? Because I know there are people that have turned around and left because they couldn't park.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, we certainly can make some signage to make them aware that they can park there if in fact the restaurant is closed.
Thank you.
Is it, Councillor, is it closed for the season or just open weekends for now? Do you know?
I'm not sure how they're opening and closing, but I do know that during the morning hours when they're not open, there's times there, and we're looking forward to the winter time when they won't be open.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So Mr. Acklin will take that back to staff and make sure they work with that business. I have Councillor Clayliff, Councillor Demery, Councillor Danch.
Is it my turn now?
It's your turn, Councillor Danch.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, I got a couple little issues here. I sometimes I think they're almost like a personal issue, but probably a bylaw thing. So I'm going down Main Street today, and Buddy's on his e-bike, and I'm clocking this guy doing like 30 kilometers an hour down the sidewalk in front of the businesses on the north side of the street. I would hate to be that person that walked out of the salon, the insurance office, one of the antique places, auto no parts, whatever, 30 kilometers an hour down the sidewalk. I ride a motorcycle. I have for years. I pay insurance all the time. I'm not a big fan of e-bikes. That's wrong. 30 kilometers an hour. I just think about the poor people that might be walking out of a store. It's not right. We need to regulate these e-bikes a little bit. I know it's by law. You can't be everywhere, but that's just a little personal thing there. And I hope nobody gets hurt. I really do, because it's all about liability and all that kind of stuff, and that's just plain wrong.
Okay, so Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Danch. As you had mentioned, that's the difficulty with someone riding the e-bike, is to actually be there when that person is violating our bylaw, riding the bike on the sidewalk. Now, if they're on the road, it's a different story. That is the NRP. But if it's something that is on our city sidewalk, the issue becomes, could we then see that actual infraction and in fact, hopefully one day issue them a ticket right on the spot? That hasn't been something we could do yet, but I believe that's going to be forthcoming.
Thanks, Dan. And thank you. I know what you're saying, but you know what? It's an accident waiting to happen. And I have a bit of a vestibule when you leave my store, and then you make a step. And if Buddy's going by, he's going to tag somebody, and that ain't right. So if I could continue, I got one for Ashley. The beach signs that we have out on Highway 3 and the 140, saying that beaches are only for Port Colborne residents. Are we going to be getting rid of those signs anytime soon? Because I'm pretty sure these things are rented monthly.
Ms. Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Danch, for the question. Yes, that's correct. They are rented on a monthly basis, and they are slated to be returned to the supplier at the end of this month.
Councillor?
Thanks so much. I mean, it's all about dating and trying to save a buck and all that kind of stuff. And just one little note for Steve, if he's still out there. There's the curb on Fielden Avenue, just before the tracks, near the old Port Colborne catering and whatnot. It's been hit by a snowplow or something like that. And I brought this to somebody's attention there a few months back, and I still see that it hasn't been fixed. I just want to make sure it's on your list of things to do. I can't give you an address, Steve. It's just before Carter Avenue. It's busted. There's about a 1 foot piece there. It's been hit with something. If we can put this on the list, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Szapowski?
Yeah, through you, your worship, to Councillor Danch. I'll check to verify it is on our list. It obviously won't get completed until next year with our concrete contract, but we can definitely put it on there and ensure that it does get fixed.
Okay, appreciate it. That's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. 2 items tonight. Thank you, Councillor Bagu, for bringing up my suggestion 2 weeks ago. I, through you, Mr. Mayor, was hoping to see councillors' items come right after delegations. Tonight was a rather short agenda with a short presentation, and we're 2 hours and 15 minutes in. And I believe that a lot of folks that are watching locally want to hear local government in action, and those are, as they always say, all politics is local. And whilst our agenda items are important, so are those items brought up. I think you and staff have done a very good job, witness tonight, the decreasing amount of councillor items because they're asked about during the week. That said, I would like the clerk to look at advancing this portion of the meeting up to, I guess tonight it would have been between 8 and 9. So I don't know if the clerk wanted to comment on it. Last meeting, she mentioned about a review of procedural bylaws and all things council meeting, but I'm wondering if that could be dealt with earlier, unless she's right around the corner with all those amendments, which I don't think so.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through the chair, I apologize for any confusion. I didn't think I received clear direction at the last meeting. There will be a procedural bylaw update, which we will formally change it, but I'm welcome to that change until that time. So I'm just going to ask you to make that formalized with a procedural, a motion being passed going forward. So for all future electronic meetings, that the councillor items being moved to, did you say after the presentations?
Yeah, so they'll,
Yes,
become,
ma'am.
they'll become item 9.
Thank you. I was asked the chair if you could organize that
Yeah.
vote for me.
So I'll have a mover, Councillor Bruno, seconder, Councillor Bagu, to move the councillor and staff items ahead, which will be right after our delegations and presentations. Any questions to that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just one more. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but it seems to me that we're getting a lot more bridge closures prior to the canal closing for various lengths of time. And I took notice the last couple days with the Main Street Bridge up that, you know, we can all come from, and they're welcome improvements, down Kalali Street East, see that flashing light and know which way to go. We can go down Main Street, and of course we've got to go that way if we want to, if we're at the north end and we want to hit the middle bridge. We also have that flashing light there letting us know. If you come from Kalali or down King and think, oh, I'll try that first canal bridge, was that 19A? And then you get into the vortex where 19A is up and 19 is in disrepair. And I can tell you that yesterday there was 9 of us turning around in the fire hall parking lot, because once you make the commitment at Kalali, you're in a trough that you're going to turn around or wait, or if you wait, you're getting stacked up on Mellenby. And then you're trying to either pass to get to the fire hall to turn around, or the line keeps stacking up. Wouldn't it be nice if we could look at another signaling at Kalali and King to let us know bridges are up? I haven't thought about this much, but you know, even if staff could look at the other 2 warning signs, I mean, if there was a way to let you know, it was, the Jackknife Bridge, the Middle Bridge, or the Clarence Street Bridge, whether that be 19A and 21, or whether it's Bridge 1, 2, 3, I think for locals, anything we can do to either ease traffic, expedite it, both for commercial and residents, would be a good thing. I'm not quite sure if that's something that your office with the Seaway, or whether Steve and his people could have a look at that whole idea of another warning point. I think anything we can do to stop and go and save idling would be a good thing.
Thank you,
So maybe I'll
Councillor.
direct that towards Steve, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'll speak to staff with regards to that, so I'll bring Steve in. I know the CAO and I and Mr. Long have a meeting with the Seaway coming up in the next, after you get back. So it'll be about 3 weeks from now. So we'll bring that forward. But let us talk to staff first, so we can take that ask to that meeting.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Mr. Louie, anything to add?
Through your worship of council, I do recall this item coming up in the last term of council, and it's my recollection that there was a technological barrier at the time. Might have something to do with the crossing of the weir with cables and automation and making the sign happen. But I know they have the exact same sign in, I don't know the bridge number, but Allenburg, going from the Niagara Falls side to the Pelham side. There's a sign that says bridge available and not available. Maybe it could be deployed at this location, and the meeting that you've referenced is the perfect time to approach the Seaway about that.
Okay, good. Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Bodnar? Thank you. Councillor Borger's not here. Councillor Bagu?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, you guys are the best. Well, it's because you're taking staff's advice and getting this stuff done prior to us getting here and not letting it simmer for a week, but no, I do appreciate what you guys do out there. Okay, bylaws, Madam Clerk.
The first bylaw on the agenda this evening has been removed. There's two bylaws with the renumbering. It would be 6822-72-20 and 6823-73-20.
Okay, I'll have Councillors Kalaloff and Councillor Desmarais to move the bylaws. Any questions with regards to those? Councillor Bodnar.
It's a question on how those bylaws are listed. Unless I missed it, we used to have just a simple, the headings of the bylaws. Now when you go down the agenda and hit bylaws, you get 53 pages of the subdivision agreement to get to the next one. Am I missing something here, or?
Well, on your council agenda, in just the, there is a section that you'll have at the beginning of the agenda that just shows the bylaw number and a brief description. Then when you get into the meat and potatoes of the agenda, that's where you are there. If you go further up, where you've got each item, so it's page 24. Yeah, there you go, page 24 of your agenda. When you get to e-scribe, this will be a lot better.
I was going further. That's what I wanted to say. Thanks. Yep.
You got that, Councillor? You're okay?
Got it. Yep.
When you get to e-scribe, you're just gonna thank everybody. Why didn't we do this sooner? Because you're gonna love e-scribe, believe me. Okay, any further questions on this? All those in favor, please raise their hand. Let's carry unanimously. Thank you, Council. And that's it. So again, thank you for joining us this evening, and we ask you to please stay safe. And remember, wash those hands, social distance, wear your mask where appropriate. If you can't social distance, or you're within in a building. And again, please stay safe out there. This meeting is now adjourned.